you get started in this whole creepy storytelling thing on YouTube?
Yeah, well, I originally was in the military. I was a SEAL. I did 7 years in the teams, and then when I got out in 2017, I kind of drifted a little bit. I did some work with charity. Did some veteran charity work, and I don't know. I just sort of floundered around for a couple of years. And I'm married. I got 3 kids, so I'm sort of like trying to figure it out. I have this small pension coming in that's enough to sort of subsist on. But then I remember watching a lot of Gary Vee. And more specifically, I saw Gary Vee was just every post he did. It was like, everybody, no matter how old you are, no matter what you're doing, you should be posting content online. Like everyone should be doing it. And when I was in the military, you're sort of in a bubble. I mean, you certainly have access to the internet and all the things that everybody else does in the civilian world. But especially in the SEAL teams, from my experience, you're so like tribal. All your time is spent really with your teammates or at the team. It's very isolated and you don't even realize it. And so I didn't have social media when I got out. I wasn't up to date on modern stuff. And Gary Vee was sort of the first sort of civilian person I was seeing that was like, this is what you do, as a civilian, you post constantly. And I began, in addition to doing some charity work I was doing, just trying my hand at social media, posting content that's like so bad.
What was the intent?
Honestly, there wasn't a clear intent other than, man, what the hell? Like, it doesn't cost. I'm already paying for the internet. I already own a phone.
Right.
Effectively, the worst that'll happen is I will embarrass myself by posting something that nobody cares about, or maybe my friends and family will see and it'll be embarrassing. But I've always been someone that's been pretty comfortable with sort of embarrassing myself. I mean, if you think about SEAL training, a big part of it is you're raising your hand in a pretty public way, at least amongst your circle of friends and family, saying, I'm going to go see if I'm good enough. And a lot of people aren't. And so I went through that process and I narrowly got through, but I sort of had it in my mind that whatever, like try stuff. And so social media, influenced heavily by Gary Vee, it was like, why not? I'll post content. Maybe someone will be interested. Nothing worked. I mean, it wasn't even like some was close. It was just nobody was paying attention. And it was like, okay, I'm not devastated. It is what it is. But then on a whim, I myself personally love strange, dark, and mysterious content. I used to love there's a YouTube channel, I think it's still around now, it's called Dark 5. And all it is just like crazy true mysteries around the world, talking about how there's like, potentially military bases hidden in Antarctica and there's the UFO sightings here. I thought it was fascinating. And on a whim in 2020, when my social media career is basically non-existent, I was at this water park, an indoor water park with my wife and kids, Great Wolf Lodge in Pennsylvania, great spot. And I was like, what I'm going to do? I'm going to try something I haven't tried on my social media attempts so far. I'm going to tell like a crazy mystery, a true mystery that I think is really interesting because I think it's cool. It's the first time I'm not trying to copy trends or like do Gary Vee content. I'm just going to like tell a story I like. And I pull out my phone and I tell this 60-second rendition of this mystery called the Dyatlov Pass mystery. Are you familiar with this?
No.
Oh, great. It's a great story. I post the 60-second version of the story, but I'll tell you the story in a minute. I leave my phone in the room because I'm going to the water park, indoor water park. I don't want to get wet. So I leave it there, come back 2 hours later. Millions of views on this video, and I've never gotten views on anything, and it's millions of views. There's like
in just a few hours?
In a few hours, like 5 million views on this video.
What? Was it TikTok?
TikTok. This is when TikTok was just to the moon. So there's this, it's an amazing story. You probably have heard of it because it's one of those stories that it's made its rounds on the internet. So remember I told the 60-second version was gritty, but it had the pictures and stuff. So in 1959, there were these 9 hikers. Actually, there was 10. These 10 young, like 20-something-year-old hikers in Russia. And they were like the best mountaineers in Russia at the time. And they were going for what's called their level 3 hiking test, which sounds sort of lame, but it's effectively at the time in Russia, this is like the top credential for mountaineers. If you have this credential, you are the best mountaineer in the land. And the way the test worked is effectively, you're in a class of your own at this level already. It's sort of like being a PhD student where you sort of create your own material. You have to do that for this test. You map out a route that you'll take that, effectively checks off all the boxes of difficulty. You put this map down, somebody approves, this is going to be hard enough that if you successfully navigate this course that you've mapped out in X amount of time, if you do that, you pass the test, you're a level 3 mountaineer. And so these 10 hikers, eventually actually only 9 left. One had a dental issue, so he spared himself. 9 of these hikers, they step out, I think it was in January of 1959, to do this hike that's been planned out. And they brought cameras along. And they're like this young, they're beautiful, they're all like couples, they're all friends. And it
sounds like an awesome opening to a horror movie.
This gets wild. If you've not heard the story, you're in for a treat because the pictures are crazy. They step out, and the Ural Mountains is rugged. It's like these huge, windswept, icy mountains. There's like a couple sections of forest, but it's just as rugged can be. And so these hikers step off, and they start taking pictures. And even though it's 1959, the pictures they're taking could be taken today. It's almost like selfie style. They're smiling. Everyone's in such good spirits. They know they're going to pass this test. This is nothing for them. This is a victory lap. And so off they go into the Ural Mountains. It's going to be like a multi-day hike, but they're expected to be out, or I guess finished with their route, I think on February 12th. So it's a several week-long hike. February 12th, and they were supposed to send some message to say they were complete with the hike. February 12th comes, and no message is sent. No one gets word that these 9 hikers have successfully navigated this treacherous stretch of the mountains. And at first, to be honest, no one was really that concerned because, one, there's 9 of them. They are quite literally some of the best mountaineers in the land. If anybody can withstand the elements, it's them. And so there wasn't this immediate call to action. But over the coming days after February 12th, the families of these 9 hikers got really concerned. They're like, we haven't heard from them. Where are they? Like, the government needs to get involved. Somebody needs to go looking for them. And so eventually, at the end of February, a search party is launched for these hikers. And at first, it was just a couple of volunteers. It was some students from a university. It was not that serious of a search. But they eventually come across their campsite, and pictures are taken of their campsite. So from a strategic perspective, not that I claim to be a mountaineer, but if you were going to be setting up a place, if you were going to set your tent up in a really rugged environment like the Ural Mountains, the worst place to put your tent is the side of a windswept mountain where there are no trees, because it'll be relentless wind. Any weather's going to be worse up there. You're on a slope, avalanche risk. I mean, the worst place you could put your tent is the side of a mountain. And so they're looking for these missing hikers who were the best hikers, and they find their tent, their one canvas tent that's right in the middle of this pass I believe it's called the Dyatlov Pass, which is why the mystery has been named the Dyatlov Pass. It's just one lone tent, and there's no trees, nothing. And so they go up to the tent. The hikers are not there, but the tent is collapsed, as you see in the picture there. And they look inside the tent, and there's clothes, like cold weather gear, there's pots, and there's a lot of equipment that you would imagine they would have brought with them out here is still in the tent. The hikers are missing. And they discover, through whatever testing they did, that there was a cut made in the tent that apparently was made from the inside out. Someone took a knife, and I believe it was a knife, and cut the tent open from the inside out. And so they have all this equipment, and they're thinking, we're in the middle of the Ural Mountains. It's like negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit out here. It's the middle of winter. You need this equipment to survive. Where are the hikers? They left all their equipment in their tent. Where are they? And so the search expanded exponentially at that point, because now these volunteers have discovered this incredible site. They can't find the hikers. A bigger search party comes out there, and they discover footprints that are about 100 feet away from where the tent was found. It's a little bit further down the mountain. And the footsteps, some of them are 2 boots, matching boots of someone's steps. There's 8 or 9 prints. They couldn't be sure. 8 or 9 sets of prints. Some have only 1 boot on, like barefoot and a boot. Others are just barefoot. And remember, this is the middle of winter in Russia. But they're looking at these prints, and if you look at the tent, it's been cut from the inside. They've clearly abandoned their tent. Something's happened. but the cadence of the footprints as it picks up where they found it near the tent, going down the mountain away from the campsite, they're walking. There's no sense of urgency. Someone analyzed the footprints, and they're walking. So they're walking down the mountain, some without boots on, some with one boot on, leaving most of their equipment behind. And so the search party, they follow these prints down to the edge of this ominous looking forest. There's only so many forests out there. This is one of them, this relatively small but fairly dense forest. And the prints sort of stop right there at the edge of the forest. And so they go into the trees, they're looking around, and they eventually come across this big cedar tree. And at the base of the cedar tree is this little burned out fire, like a puny little fire, and then crouched around it is one of the hikers who's deceased. And I believe there's a picture. I don't know if you can show it on your channel, but
sure.
Yeah, so there's a picture of one of the hikers who is sort of almost like he was trying to get warmth against this fire.
That one?
I don't think it's that one. There are some right near the cedar tree. I'm sure you can find them. One is dead, and then another one is sort of nearby as well. So there's two hikers that are both deceased from the initial thought is exposure, hypothermia exposure. But critically, there's a couple really weird things about it. One, I think that's got to be the picture right there. And that does not show the bodies, but the bodies are near. I think that's one right there to the right of that. That could be one of them. But picture two bodies sort of laying scattered nearby. Mm-hmm. They look at the tree that was at the base of where the fire was, and there are signs that something was trying to climb the tree. There's broken branches and the like, and there's human tissue. That sounds way more extreme than it's supposed to, but there's human tissue pretty high up this tree that suggests somebody had climbed up the tree. And then they examined the bodies, and they found one of the men had part of his hand he had bitten off and was in his throat, or it might have just been human tissue as well, but it was clearly in his mouth, like he was eating his own flesh, or it at least arrived in his mouth. So they're dead. And so the search expands within this forest, and they find three more hikers sort of about 100 or 200 feet away from this tree. They're in similar condition. They're all deceased. They're all sort of ragged. Some of them are only wearing, a little bit of clothing. They're all dead, but they can't find the remaining four hikers. They continue to search for the next several days, but the weather was pretty severe, and so ultimately they decided that at this point it's a recovery mission. We're not going to find them. They're going to be dead. So they waited until the thaw in May, and once the snow had thawed a bit, they came out there and they found this what looked to be like they believed that a snow fort had been made maybe 300 or 400 feet away from that cedar tree, which they wouldn't have seen it during the winter. It was you wouldn't have seen it, but it had melted down enough, and the rest of the bodies were found in the remnants of the snow cave. And the four hikers that were in there just had catastrophic injuries. They're all deceased. The woman, or one of them, had a crush injury. His chest they compared the injury to his chest equivalent to being struck by a car at high speed. However, he had no or limited lacerations, like there was no impact to his body. His chest was sort of just inexplicably caved in. And so he's been crushed. One guy, I think his skull was fractured and a piece of his skull was missing. But the one that stands out is there was one hiker, a woman, who her lips and her eyes were missing, and some accounts claim that the lips appeared to have been surgically removed. At least there was like very tight lines of how it was animal predation. You'd see tearing.
Right. This
was like relatively straight lines where her lips were removed. And then another hiker, his eyes were also missing, and so they're all dead. And they also noticed that the woman was wearing men's clothing, or some clothing that was clearly not hers, and then one of the men, or a couple of the men, were wearing some of her clothing, like they had exchanged clothing. And they found trace levels, albeit small, but trace levels of radiation on some of the clothing, and they're all dead. And so now all the hikers have been found, and by this point, this is in May of 1960, I believe it is at this point, this is a huge story in Russia. This is equivalent to being super viral today. Everybody was talking about it. The families are very outspoken about it. People want answers. They want to know what happened. And so the Russian government, they launched this investigation into what happened out there in the Dyatlov Pass. And quickly they shut down this investigation. Like very quickly they shut it down. And the only things people heard were there were numerous reports from military personnel and some civilians who apparently were in the area, in the Urals, that claimed to have seen glowing orbs like fireballs. I think they described them as being balls of fire and light shooting up and down. It's hard to tell if it was in the same area where the hikers were, but there were all these independent reports of strange lights over the Ural Mountains that could corroborate or could line up with when those hikers all died. And then also, lastly, the Russian government came out and said, well, we've determined that the 9 hikers died from an overwhelming, or I think they called it a compelling force. And then they closed it. I believe they made it completely confidential. No, the families didn't get access to it. It's completely shut down. And then in 2020, the reason I told it is because it sort of began making rounds because I believe some of the pictures had been redacted and you could see these pictures. And so I said at the start of my video, at the end of this 60-second clip, you're going to Google 2 words, and it was Dyatlov Pass. And so I teased the story and said, Google it for yourself, and it's a whole rabbit hole of crazy stuff.
That's a crazy story. So compelling force is a very weird way to describe a bunch of people dying. Compelling force?
It might have been compelling natural force, but
that makes more sense. You froze to death.
Well, they could have come out and said that.
Right.
They basically said, yep.
Are you sure it's not a translation issue?
There are several translations of how it came out, and it effectively amounts to some sort of compelling, overwhelming force.
Does Russia have a different way of distinguishing how people die in autopsy reports than we do, maybe?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm not sure on that.
It might be like the way Russian language works and where they describe things. Yeah. Like they might have categories for deaths. Compelling natural force might just mean like
it could be
freezing to death is in the same category as like dying in the Mojave Desert.
I think that's I've always assumed that probably what happened is something rational happened. I mean, when you become hypothermic, you can have, it's called paradoxical undressing, where at your final stage of when you're so cold, you actually get hot and you take your clothes off. And I would imagine if you're in the final stages of dying, you might do some funny things. And also,
would you cut your lips off, though?
Would you surgically remove your lips?
And where are the lips? But then the question is, like, is there an image of that? Like, can we see it? Like, this is one of the things that people talk about all the time when it comes to crop circles, or cattle mutilation. I put them all in the same category. Like, who the fuck knows what that is? But cattle mutilation, one of the weird things that they associate with extraterrestrials or whatever they think it is that these cuts are very surgical.
Yeah.
And it's not an animal just tearing apart a cow. That these cuts, they look like they're made with a scalpel or perhaps some sort of a laser. And also, these creatures are completely drained of blood. So I'd like but I've seen the cattle mutilation images, and you're like, wow, that is strange. I'd like to see what their lips look like.
I do know that actually, and it has nothing to do with the fact that I posted about it, because the Dyatlov Pass gets posted about quite a bit, but I think it was in 2022, Russia actually re-examined the Dyatlov Pass mystery now and sort of said, okay, we're going to look at it again. And they determined that an avalanche, like a slab of ice, broke loose, a huge slab. This could be totally wrong. I know it's an avalanche or a slab of ice that they basically said was responsible for all of this, that it led to them somehow becoming exposed, hypothermia and the like. But